would you like us, if asked by our friends, families, or strangers who want to know how you pay for the Freedom Dividend? Explain how you pay for it in 3 or 4 sentences. We got a little more time than that, but how do you simply say how we pay for this thing?
All right, so there are 4 ways you can think of getting the money. But number 1 is, right now we have the biggest companies in our country that are paying 0 or near 0 in taxes. Amazon, $1 trillion tech company, 0 in taxes. Netflix, 0 in taxes. Google moves a lot of earnings to Ireland. Like, they don't pay 0, but they pay a lot less than you'd think. Parking tens of billions of dollars in other parts of the world. So number 1 is like, how do you pay for it? You give us a slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile, hundreds of billions in new revenue. And so this is the thing that maybe these numbers help people. It's like someone looks at it and says something like Andrew, like, how can you pay for that? Isn't that, let's call it like 2.4 trillion a year or something like that? And then you say, wow, that sounds like a lot of money. Our GDP is 21 trillion. And then someone's like, like when people think about like these numbers, it's like, we are the richest, most advanced economy in the history of the world. If you put it in the size of our economy, then let's call it 2.4, doesn't sound as bad. But if you start with this 2.4, if you have this mechanism where we share in the gains of the biggest winners of the 21st century economy, right, generates, let's call it 800 billion plus.
Right. And what's the total cost of this plan?
Let's call it 2.4 trillion, which is about right.
2.4. And 800 billion would you get from
the value-added tax and the rest of it. All right. So
which every other country has. Developed country.
Every other developed country already has it.
So people say it's crazy.
Oh no, like any economist looks at it. Like the tax foundation was like, yeah, this is actually the best mechanism. Everyone kind of knows it. The only reason the value-added tax not been on the table in America is because the companies have been lobbying the crap out of it to try and keep it off the table. Like, that's really it.
Right.
All right. So then you're like, okay, 800 billion is not 2.4 trillion. So what's up with that? And you're like, oh, well, here's where some of the magic occurs. After you put the money into our hands, we spend it. It ends up growing our consumer economy quite significantly. The money circulates over and over again, and then we get more tax revenue for the fact that there is like more purchasing, more traveling, more business starts, more hiring. Like, all of that stuff generates hundreds of billions of dollars, depending upon how aggressive you get with like how much the growth is going to be. Let's call it 500 billion. Which is reasonable. So then you're at 1.3, so you have another 1.1 you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Then you save hundreds of billions on things like emergency room healthcare that we spend like hundreds of billions on now. Incarceration. I was with a corrections officer in New Hampshire who said we should pay people to stay out of jail because it's so costly when they're in jail. And this is a corrections officer, mind you. So you save billions on incarceration. You save billions on homelessness services. You spend billions essentially on what we currently are putting in place to try and pick up the pieces very often.
Right.
So then you're down to, let's call it like a little bit less than $1 trillion left. And then there was one study that showed that if you were to alleviate extreme poverty in this country, you would increase our GDP by 700 billion just on the basis of better educational outcomes, better health outcomes, better mental health. And then, so this is like a massive investment in our human capital. If you're a company, all the time as a company, you go around saying, hey, we have to invest in our people. We have to invest in our people. Because the thought is if you invest in your people, then they'll be more productive and then your company wins. We've all at least heard that. I mean, if you work for a good company, if you work for one of the rich companies, they actually send you to some ridiculous training for like a week. Where like, and then you were like, hey, did I learn anything in this training? Sort of. But like, I really appreciated it. And then so like, it sinks in. Like you actually feel that. And then in the public sector, we try and disinvest. We try and be like, let's not spend any money on that person. Right. And then we end up getting stuck with the bill later. So if you invest in your human capital, you end up increasing the size of the pie by hundreds of billions conservatively, and then we get a lot of that value back, especially because it's literally us. So to go through the list again, fair share of the winners of the 21st century economy, cost savings on emergency room healthcare, homelessness services, incarceration, and various social ills. Economic growth, actually reverse that. So I'll say economic growth number 2, incarceration, homelessness services, and emergency room healthcare is number 3, and like the other things that we spend money on. And then number 4 is better health outcomes, better education outcomes, stronger human capital, better mental health, better decision making, higher productivity, higher entrepreneurship, etc. So if you add these 4 up, you come pretty close to the 2.4 trillion headline number. And again, you have to bear in mind that like this is money in our hands. That if you're a company and you say, hey, we're going to pay a dividend, no one ever says, well, that's a waste of money, because by definition, it can't be a waste of money. It's like, it's the money getting returned to shareholders. In this case, the money literally goes to us. We're the citizens and shareholders of this country. It's actually the best possible use of proceeds.
Right.
Because if the money goes to us, then we're the best determiners of how to allocate those resources.
One of the things
So that was a little bit long-winded. I'm sorry about that.
but you summed it up.
But I summed it up.
Yeah. One of the things you say a lot is one of the biggest lies in America is that we don't have the money.
Oh yeah, Zach knows this too. Biggest lies in America is we don't have the money. And there's like this, there really is some very strange stuff going on where people, another way, it's like people say like, how do you pay for it? You could say this: how did we pay for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street? You remember voting for that? Remember getting the referendum being like, do you want to vote for the $4 trillion bailout? Do you remember anyone caterwauling about where you're going to get the money? Do you remember that? I don't. No, it was like, hey, the banks need $4 trillion. Let's do it. Let's pull that. Let's pull the lever. And during that time, and it was a tough time, like literally our society was on the precipice, so you can't Monday morning quarterback it too much. But if you had a choice between bailing out the banks and trying to keep more Americans in their homes, like let's say forgiving some of the mortgage debt and the rest of it, in my mind, you should definitely have done some of the latter.
I said, what you say, what you say, what you say. He said, I'm Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang. You've earned a freedom dividend.